In this session, we'll just let you know about what is AngularJS. We'll not deep dive into it. We'll just have the basics of it, how to start an AngularJS application, and later gradually we'll learn how to build an inline editing system with the AngularJS. So this is a bit of myself. I work in Accenture as an SAP BW consultant. As a BW consultant, I work on data analytics. I analyze clients' data. I have been a blogger, freelance dev trainer, and app developer. For any queries, you can reach me at mail@shubhamsaxena.com, or you can tweet me at shubham0987. So, if you noticed our agenda is nothing but introduction into AngularJS, creating a basic app in AngularJS. Then we will quickly look about HTTP request in AngularJS. Then have a look at filters, some custom filters or predefined filters. And then we'll use all these four to build an inline editing system. So what is AngularJS? What you understand by AngularJS? Let's have a look. Many of you call it a JavaScript library. But what I feel is AngularJS is not a JavaScript library, because we don't have any functions which we can directly call and use. Like in JavaScript, we have some date functions or other functions, we can directly call and use them. But in AngularJS, everything is basically focal to scope. If you have noticed, if you have earlier seen Angular code, you might have seen that every function is an Angular function. Like we describe scope, and then so every function has to be an Angular function here. So we cannot call it a JavaScript library. It's actually not also a DOM manipulation, like we have jQuery now. But yes, AngularJS do uses the part of jQuery. Actually not jQuery, it is JQLite. So it is not actually jQuery also. AngularJS focuses more on the HTML side of the web applications. It's not about just writing the business logics here, but it modifies your HTML, like be it your HTML attribute, HTML class, or anything else. So AngularJS is not actually jQuery library, not a JavaScript library, but maybe a combination of all these. AngularJS basically focuses more on MVC and MVVM design patterns. As you all know, MVC, MVVM, and MVW are more in fashion now. We just saw what is MVC and how it can simplify our interface and user interface for the web applications. So what happens in AngularJS is we try to use these design patterns to build our website more interactively in a better manner. So AngularJS is basically a JavaScript MVC framework created by Google to build properly architectured and maintainable web application. So next point comes, why AngularJS? If you go to Google and search about the MVC framework with JavaScript libraries, you might find multiple options. Knockout.js, AngularJS, or maybe some other things. But why am I choosing AngularJS? AngularJS enhances HTML by attaching directives, custom tags, any attributes, expressions, and moreover, these things can be done by other things also like Knockout.js. But Angular seems to be doing it more efficiently and bringing out the most of the user experience to us. It encourages TDD. This TDD is test-driven development. AngularJS is good for testing while development. So we can test our modules even if the whole application is not yet completed, and we can do it by small chunks. It also encourages MVC and MVVM design patterns, so it keeps you up to date in the web development so that you are not left behind using the old JavaScript patterns, but you use the latest MVC or MVVM design patterns. Here we have code reusability. Like Abhishek mentioned in his slides, that we can use a code again in the first part or the next part. It's not like copy and paste the code, but we can write a module or maybe write a directive, and then we can use it anywhere else in the application. So once written a directive can be included anywhere else. We have ng templating and ng includes, so we can use it multiple times. So we not have to write the code every time, but we can use it anywhere if you want. AngularJS is very good for writing single page applications. So Angular ng routing is a very much interesting thing which is provided by Angular. So here we can use to create an ng single page app. So we need not to navigate to different pages. We have to just keep it module wise and load that module on a page, so that we don't have to navigate to different pages from, like, say, index page to home page or then to profile page. So we make it very simple on a single page and make use of ng routing, so that we have to load the different pages and provide a better user experience. And also in this way we have very less time, so that user gets the data very frequently and like in live update, like it's real-time updation. AngularJS handles the JavaScript libraries very friendly, and also these functions can be used within AngularJS, so that we have a live environment, so that we can create easily the things out of JavaScript and jQuery or something like that. So here is the list of some key features which are used in AngularJS. We have declarative HTML approach, like we can use a directive like in attribute or something like that. We have data binding techniques. We can bind data from view to model or model to view, two-way, one-way, whatever you want. We have reusable components, like our controller can be used somewhere else, and we have design patterns introduced. We can have dependency injection here. We can create some other include some other library into us. We have filters, like so many things we have. So in this webinar, we will see about filters. We will see something about form validation. We will have some scopes and HTTP requests. We will see a bit of expressions. We'll see data binding, and of course MVC will be everywhere since it's an AngularJS article. Let's have first a view of what's model view controller. Abhishek give you a quick overview of model view controller, MVC and everything, but I'll just guide you my way what is model view controller in respect of AngularJS. So we have three components. So as per me, what is view is whatever the user views in a web application on a browser is the view for the user. Whatever the controller is, it controls the view. Whatever the action it receives on the view, suppose we click on a button, so it's an action from the view, and this click event action has to be controlled by a controller. And model is nothing but, you can in general say, a data. This controller receives the action from the view, performs the business logic or have some data over it, and binds it to the view. It can be a two-way binding also or one-way binding also. Like you can bind the data from model to view, and once you have to update the view, we can do vice versa also. Like we have updated the view, the model will also be updated. Like we have HTTP request to update the database tables. So from view, we can update the model also. So the first action is any event or user action or view load. Some are the steps which are loaded on the starting itself, like some bootstrap in the initialize, like we have main methods in like C programs. So we on view load also we can do it, or on user actions like on button click or select or value change, something like that. When an event is handled by a controller handles that event and fetches the data for the model. So suppose we am clicking on the get users, so this controller will do perform some actions for me, and from the model it will fetch my data. So after fetching the data, the model can implement some business logics and it will bind it to the view. So after performing some business logics, the data will be refreshed for the user, like without having been page refreshed. Like traditionally what we used to have is, once a user comes to a web browser, it requests to a web page. Suppose let's say I'm on a view profile and I want to edit my profile. So if I go to edit profile, I'll be redirected to a new page, edit profile.php something, and it will fetch me the complete page and assets again, which may take a huge amount of time and also the web space. So what then AngularJS will be doing is, we will not be refreshing the complete page. Instead, we will be returning a JSON object, maybe some modified version of JSON, which we will be just having the JSON, not the complete assets or the complete web page, and hence only the data will be returned from the model, and we will be easily populated with that data. and hence we will get a refreshed web page or a refreshed status. So view renders the model data or sends the user actions event to the controller. Controller defines application behavior, maps the action to model, or select view for response. So there may be a case after being getting data from model, we have to modify the data. That can be done in controller itself, and then we can again redirect it to the view. So from view and model and view and controller, it can be a two-way arrows there. As there are only single-way arrows in the mentioned slides, it can be a two-way arrows. And model is nothing but the business logic, and it's notified when the view is changing. It defines the application functionality, and in general, as I said, it can be referred as the data. So this is how our basic AngularJS app looks. So I have divided it into 5 types. So first thing we'll do is we will refer the AngularJS library into our project. So this is the current latest version of the AngularJS which I'm referencing to in the first part. And second part is defining a AngularJS module. What is module? I'll get into it. Then third part, we will define the ng app. Then we'll have a simple controller. Before explaining these things, I would like to display you what is this in the web browser itself. So let's have a demo part of this. So in this first step, it's nothing but referencing the latest ng library. Simply referencing this ng library. The next part important is we are defining a module. So what is the requirement of module here? We have a module named myApp. As I previously mentioned, we have main functions in C programs which initially instantiates the program, so the program knows from where it has to be started. But in Angular we don't have any main program, so we need to bootstrap the main application with some directives or some main things. Like we don't have main function, as I said, so we'll define a module, and that module we will define in this ng app directive in line number 15. You can say line ng app directive is the directive which defines where to bootstrap the AngularJS application. So if I have given ng app is equals to my app, so this application, this ng library knows that we have this Angular application in this system only, since we have defined it in the body. So our ng app is only in the body part. If we define it in a particular div, so it will be in the particular that div only. The whole application won't be an ng application. So this is my ng application part. So in this we will perform some Angular functions, and this is my script. So I'll explain you what is this. So this is an Angular module function method which take 2 parameters. First one is the module name. Here in my case is my app, and the second one is a array. What is this array? This array can be a list of dependency injections. Like suppose we have some different libraries and we want to inject those libraries into our application, we'll have to just name them my library and others. So anything you can be dependency injection, you can use anything, any library into it. So anyways we are not using it now, so it is blank. So first part is done, and this part is just adding a reference to a module, so that we'll have to know in the HTML part that which is our module. So as we have defined what the module is, and this is our ng app. Now comes to ng model. ng model is another directive, and this directive has a name called name. And anything you see in a double curly braces in line number 17 is nothing but expressions. Expressions in AngularJS are mentioned into double curly braces. So I'm just binding this ng model name and displaying it here. So let's see what it looks like. So this is nothing, just a basic page. We have a input text box, and just we are binding this text box value to the ng expression. These are nothing but ng expressions. So whatever you type in this box will be binded to that expression. Like I say Shubham. So if you can see that the below step, it's automatically populating. What is happening is just binding the data. We are getting the data from this ng model and we are binding this to this expression. In AngularJS, expression can be anything, like we can do mathematical operations here, like 1 plus 2. So if you see it, 1 plus 2 is 3 printed here. So in AngularJS, we can directly perform operations, various operations using these expressions. But in my case, I was using these expressions for displaying the value of the input text box. This is what the basic AngularJS application I can think of. This is the easiest application. So we have a module defined, the minimum app which we can have. Then we have defined the ng app directive. ng app tells your application that where to start from, that this is the one which you have to bootstrap. This is your main part of the application. ng model is nothing but we can have different, if you want to say in a general one, you want to say it's a variable, like an ng variable, we can bind it to somewhere. Since it's a model, I told you we can bind it to a view. Like some model, we are binding it to a view which user can see. So we have different directives like ng app, ng model. We will see later more of them. So this is a basic AngularJS application. This is how a basic app can look like. So let's move ahead with it. So these all 5 things I explained: the referencing AngularJS, defining the module, ng app, ng module, and this is singular binding. We saw it in action as well. So let's see what is ng module. ng module can be considered as a container of different parts of the app, like a controller, filters, directive. Like earlier we used to have in, let's say, C program, we have classes, and then we used to have functions in it. So module contains everything which can be defined within itself, like controller, filters, or directives. So anything which has to be defined for your application, it has to be defined inside a module. So module can be considered as a container for all those things. What is the requirement of a module? So any control of how it will flow like, and moreover we have scope. So if you read more about scopes, you'll get to know about root scope and the local scope. So ng module and the controller parts play a great role in defining these scopes. So having a module in place has a better way of understanding of the scope as well. And moreover, like we have to tell your application where to start from. As I already mentioned, we don't have any main function, something like that. So we should tell the user application that we have to see something, or we have to start from this way. So we will have to define a module which will be an ng app directive, so our application knows that where to start from. This is the basic syntax of the defining ng module, where app is equals, let's say, Angular, we are using Angular library, Angular dot module is the method, and in the first argument we'll send the module name. In our case we have given my app, and the second argument would be an array. This array will be a collection of dependency injections, as I said, the libraries which you are going to inject in an application. So it can be a variable, it can be multiple options there. So it's an array. Next we have ng directives. As I said, ng app is an ng directive, ng model is an ng directive, ng repeat is an ng directive. So ng directive can be anything, a marker on the DOM element. It can be an element name, it can be a class, it can be an attribute, or anything. So ng directive just modifies the Angular structure, Angular syntax. So it can be beautifying the code, or maybe beautifying the user experience. So ng directives have a great use. So everywhere we have to make use of AngularJS, ng directives are there. So like ng app is an ng directive, like this. So this is a basic ng directive example. Here ng model is what? Angular directive. So this is the basic AngularJS ng directive syntax. Now comes the controller. Controller, as we have MVC, Abhishek told you about what the controller is and what should the controller do. So controller basically binds everything in this MVC thing. So controller has to take actions from the user, from the view maybe, and then perform some business logics, interact with model, and then update the view. So controller basically controls your application, maybe a part of application. You may have different controllers. You may load them in parallelly, you may load them serially, any way you want. So controller is nothing but a part of your application. If you then again reference it with C programs, controller can be your functions which perform various tasks. So ng controller are like JavaScript constructor class, so which can be used to augment the Angular scope. Okay, so here I would have a better example for you. Like in this example which you were saying, we had some text box when nothing was displayed there. But if you want to have some initial values for it, like you used to have a constructor class in JavaScript or C programs. So here you can use these controllers to instantiate your objects. Like ng model, in that example we have ng model user. If you want to have an initial value for that, you can set that in controller. So here is the basic syntax for defining a controller. First line is for defining a module, and the next line is app.controller. App is nothing but a reference to our angular.module, our module name, and this controller function takes two parameters. First is the controller name, and second is a function. This function can be overwritten with various parameters, like I have shown scope and HTTP here. So these are nothing but the services which we are going to use in our controller. So scope is a function service, HTTP is a service which we can use in our controller. So let's see a controller in action. So this is an app, and we have to define a controller here. We can name it myCTRL. Then we have two paths of function. So as I said, we have to extend some services to it. So these ng model name which is we are referencing here, it can be accessed in a controller by using a service called scope. So let's say if you see the basic version of this application now, so this application is not instantiating any value to this text box. If you want to have an initial value to this, let's say we'll define a controller here and say scope dot name is equals to default. In the next part, we'll have to tell the HTML where the controller exists. So let's say we'll define a div ng controller. So if you now refresh this application, see you have the initial value to this text box. So before I'm entering the value, we have the initial value to it. So AngularJS controller are not only used for defining the initial values. We'll do more over the controller part, and we'll see how the application grows on the basis of this controllers. Let's quickly see what an HTTP request is. HTTP request is simply as you have in other languages, like in Ajax we do a HTTP request, and then we receive a promise. On that promise we have two functions basically. One can be a success function or can be an error function. So if the HTTP request is successful, we receive a success function, else we receive a error function. So these are the two functions. I'll start with the code. So let's just finish the slide. I have one more with it. This is the inline editing slide. I'll tell you what we'll do with the inline editing. So in inline editing, we'll have a first function which will type get template. This get template function will do nothing. We'll just evaluate either it has to be a display event or it has to be a editing event. So how does event template works, get template works? It will check if it's selected or not. And then in the base of this we'll have a display function or the edit function. So I'm sure you might have not got a clear idea of what it is. I'll show you the code and then you'll have a better idea of it. Okay, so this is what I have written the code Oh, this seems to be huge, but don't worry, it's not too much. I've just implemented this bootstrap CSS also, so it might beautify the code. That's it. So it's not too much code. Just relax. This is how the application looks like. So I'll tell you individually one by one what all I have implemented in this and how to implement all those things in your applications. So this is simply an application with a form which takes 4 values: employee name, employee email, salary, whether it's active or not, and you can add this employee to this database. And upon adding database, we can list the employees and we can edit those employees using inline editing. So before moving ahead, I should show you first the code for the HTTP request. So if you look at this, this is the HTTP request function which I was trying to explain you. So first have a look at this line first. It's nothing but it's using a HTTP service. I have defined in my controller in line number 13 here, HTTP service. And then what I'm doing is I'm calling a function of HTTP service called post. Here the first parameter is URL. What is the URL which I'm going to access to this HTTP service? And the next parameter is the data which I'm sending to the HTTP service. Suppose we have an API which takes some data, so I'm sending this data. So basically, if you can see that I'm not using any web API, I've just developed my API, which is nothing but it just adds the employee, and you can edit the employee, you can list the employee. This is a simple API. So I'm just passing this data. My data is nothing but a JSON object. It contains 2 values, action and data. So action helps me defining or understanding from which part of this the post has been called. So I'll just check what action is to be performed and then accordingly perform the action on the data which is passed in the next object. So we have JSON object, we have passing 2 values, action and data. Action defines what needs to be done and data defines the data which is on which the action has to be performed. The next 2 lines are the 2 functions from the promise functions of the HTTP request. One is the success and one is the error part. So if a HTTP request which we have made is successful, we come back to the success function. And if HTTP request fails, we'll come back to the error part. So this is how we make a HTTP request. If you want to see this ng process file, this is the file which this is how we get the data. Get file contents, and I'm storing it in the variable called post data. And we are just since we are passing a JSON value, so I'm just decoding the JSON part and then using it in the PHP variables and further performing some actions like get employees, add employee, simple SQL commands are there. So let's start what all I have added here, or let's start modifying this app only. So since I have defined a controller, let's add a form which will have the add employee features in it. So let's say I'll copy the HTML form since I'm sure that everyone is here a web developer. So writing the HTML form is
you cannot see anything.
Sure. It's fine now, right? It's clear now?
Please repeat some of the things.
From where you all have left, I'll take a look at this section. Okay. Can anyone quickly tell me from where should I start back? Okay. I'll start from the start. So basically I'll first tell you what this application does. I'll show it in the live and then we'll see the code behind, how we have written the code.
Go on again.
Yes. So here is our application. I'll tell you what it does first and then we will see how that code helps with doing it. So this is a simple form. I've used the HTML controls here, the bootstrap CSS. So HTML controls like, see, if you can see the add employee button is still disabled. How this action has been performed. So I'm not going to what have been defined to this form. It's nothing but an HTML line. Only thing new you can see here is ng model. And in the previous basic example, we have seen that ng model is nothing but a directive which can be used as scope elements or a scope service in the controller or somewhere else. We have used the required method here, an HTML5 function, you all know it. So, as if you can see that I have made all the fields required, which helps me validating the form. So, how I've done the validation of the form, I will let you know. So, if you look at the application at first, so the add employee button is disabled, and how this is disabled is because since the form is not yet validated, means I have some validation requirements like this field is required, employee field is required, email field is required, salary field is required. So every field is required, and hence the button is still not active. So when I start entering the values, like I say webinar, right, email, I would say salary, I would say 0 since this webinar is free. So I would say active. So if you can see that add employee button is now activated. Earlier it was not active for me. I was not able to click it. See, if I clear this value, it becomes inactive again because the form is not yet valid. So if it becomes valid only when we fill in the all required fields. So since once after filling all the required fields, it becomes active. And how it has been done, we'll see in the code first. So this all is nothing but the simple HTML. Only we have added ng model to every part, like employee salary, employee email, employee name, employee active. That's it. This everything is HTML here. Now what we have used is ng disabled. Now what does this do is, this enables or disables a button or any element which we have applied it on. So here we applied it on a button. So ng disabled will do is, it will disable or enable the button upon the condition which is mentioned in the parameter. So ng disabled is equals to form.invalid. Form is nothing but the name of the form. You can see in line number 17 we have defined name for this form. And ng disabled is form.invalid. $invalid is an ng function which will check their form is valid or not. Also, if you can notice in line number 17, we have written no validate. No validate is nothing but an HTML5 command which will not show you the pop-up like it showed earlier, like you have not filled this. If you, okay, I'll try removing this. So if you see, if I click on add employee now, it will show me a required field error. Oh, sorry, it would not show now because I'm using a button. This required field actually works when we use the input type submit. So since we are not using the input type submit, so we need not require the HTML5 validation. So we have used no validate here. So we are using ng disable directive, which will take my form name. From line number 70, we'll take the form name like form here, and we'll use it in the ng disabled part is form.disable, so form.invalid, which will pass me a boolean value, and on the basis of that boolean value, our button will be enabled or disabled. So we have this value, it's a simple keyword that invalid, that's it. Nothing else, nothing new for the AngularJS, only one word which will validate my form and help me writing the code. So this is on the part of the validation part. I'll show you the code, how this add employee button works. So on entering the valid values to this, let's say test@test.com. Let's say salary 12k. Add, yes, employee is added, and upon being added, I'm listing all the employees. So if you can see that I have 3 values here. So all these values are iterating. See, if you see in my code, I have not written 3 times, right? And everything here is HTML. Like we have to use PHP code earlier, which iterates through a while loop. I have not used anything like that. Instead, I have used an ng repeat directive. I'll show you how it works. So there's a list where I can edit or delete it. So we'll see the inline editing later. and also we can delete the values. So this deleting and adding the employee is nothing but an HTTP request I'm making to a database. So if you check the code for add employee button, here's the add employee button. So add employees to DB. This is the function I'm calling. So let's see what this function does. This is the code for add employee that I'm typing. What I'm doing is I'm collecting all the ng model values into a JSON object. I'm defining a JSON object employee data, and these ng model values I'm collecting in an object: the employee name, employee email, employee salary, and the active status. So this object which I've created here, I'll pass in my HTTP request here. So I'm passing the action as add employee, and then data is my JSON object. Upon success, I'll refresh my get employees function. Means I'll call my get employee function again, which will refresh the list. We have two functions, success and the error. So upon successfully HTTP request, we will just refresh the list of the employees by this function, line number 47, and on error we'll face this error and we'll just write in console message. So we'll see if it fails or not. So simply we have created a JSON object from the ng model values and then the HTTP request we are doing. So if you want to see the function we have used in a PHP, okay. Anyone here is a PHP developer? I would like to see the PHP code for this. Okay, I'll just give you a brief what it is. So in this is the main two lines I'm using for it. Rest everything is purely PHP. So the contents I'm getting it from the file is this way. Like the value, the JSON object I'm passing is I'm getting in the line number 4. And since it's a JSON object, I'm decoding it to the basic structure. Then I'm taking the action and the data differently, which I defined that action will define which function to be called and the data which action to be performed. So add employee will action table take me to here. It will be a simple insert query and will be inserted to the database. So this will do it the HTTP part, and on success I'll refresh this. This get employee function, if you want to see, is again an HTTP request and the data will be written. See what data is written. If you see the get employee function, we are returning the complete array of the list of the employees. Select star from employees, and whatever we are fetching, fetch all. We are encoding it in the JSON value first, because in Angular we used to pass and receive the objects in the JSON itself. So we are encoding in JSON and then returning it to the controller. And here the controller what it is doing is the data returned from the PHP we are getting in the data parameter, and this we are assigning this data parameter to the scope.employees, the array which we have defined in the top. And these array which we will be using to iterate in the HTML part and the view part to iterate these values and display the list of the customers. So this function will do nothing, just HTTP request to get the list of all the employees and store it in the variable and array scope employees. Let's see how we iterate the array in a view part, that is an HTML part. So here's the list of employees. I am using an ng directive, ng repeat. I'm writing here employee in employees. Employee is nothing but my array, and employee is nothing, just a means like array object. Suppose we have 5 values, so array will be array index 0, array 1, array 2, array 3. So employee will be a particular index. So employees will be iterating all the indexes in the array of the employees and will do part of the each index. So leave this part while ng included the enter. I'll tell you in the next step. So simply if you want to write, okay, include this, exclude this, ng the include, it's not required as of now, and don't confuse with this line also. Okay, let me do this one thing. I will cut it. Okay, this is better now. I'm removing ng include. So this is what it's doing is it's repeating the tr. Every row will be repeated and will display what I'm getting employee each index from the employee array. So employee.employee name, employee.email, salary, and add. I'll get into this currency part first later, and we'll see this is how we iterate in the array of the AngularJS objects. So if you see employee, so if you of an array employees, and I'm iterating all these values using ng repeat directive. So what happens is ng repeat will give me one singular index, and I'm displaying all those values. What is this part? So if you look at my agenda, what I'm missing is the filters, and this is nothing but the filters. So I'm using a pre-built filter here, currency, and this currency, let's see what a difference it makes. If I remove this filter and refresh it, I'm getting the value of the employee salary as a number itself. But I want to add some variable to it, means like currency to it. Let's say Indian rupee or US dollars. So if I simply write currency, it will be default dollar value. So if I just refresh, it will show me dollar values. So it has started with the dollar. So this is nothing but a filter. So applying filter is very much easy. Just add a pipeline to the model and then write the filter name. It can be a custom filter also. It can be a predefined filter also. So currency here is a predefined filter. And if you check in the active status, and also this thing, if you want to see, this is nothing but a parameter to a currency filter. So I'm just passing the value of the INR symbol, so that displays the INR symbol there instead of the dollar symbol. In the next line, if you see, I'm using a filter called active. This is not a predefined function or predefined filter. I'm just creating this filter, and I'll show you how to create a filter, and I'll tell you what is the need of this filter. So this filter will actually, okay, let's see database first. If you see my database from where I'm fetching or retrieving, so this is my database from where I'm fetching or inserting the values. So if you look at the active column, I'm storing only 0 or 1. It's not yes or no. But if you look at the web app or application, it's displaying no and yes, because 0 and 1 doesn't make sense to the user. So we are displaying no and yes. So how we are converting the value from 0, 1 to yes and no? I'm just using a filter here. It's a custom filter which will just change the value of yes or no to 0, 1 to yes or no. So this is the simplest code for a filter. Like we have a controller method, now we can have filter method as well. App.filter. It will again take 2 parameters. Then first will be an active, that is the name of the filter. Then again the function. This function again will return a function. If you can see that in line number 5, we are returning a function here. So return function, I'm getting the input value. What is this input value? This is nothing but the value in front of this filter is written. So if I call this active filter now, this will pass this employee.active in this line number 5. So if you want to check, this input will be nothing but employee.active value. So what I'm doing here is, if the input value is 1, return yes, else return no. So instead of getting 0 and 1 from the database, I'm getting yes or no. So it's more user friendly that I can get values like yes or no. So this is how you can build your filters and play with things. Like also you can see one thing, I'm getting the employee name here. If you want to convert it to a uppercase, simply add a pipe sign, and you can use the inbuilt filter uppercase, and you will see the value is now in uppercase. So this is how the inbuilt filters and the custom filters work. You can create your own also. So this was about adding the employees to the table, displaying the employees to the table, using all the HTTP requests and creating your filters and using independent filters. The main part comes in the inline editing. I want to edit these values without going to the different page. So this was the code written earlier for this, which I have removed. I'll add the code now again and then let you know what is this code. Just to check the code is added or not. Okay, so what is this ng include? Okay, I told you in the starting, the inline editing will create using while we are iterating in an array, we will check for each index that we have to display it or we have to edit it. So this ng include is calling a function called get template, and this get template is passing the index value like employee. It's not passing employees, it's passing employee. Employee is an index of an array employees. So at a time it will pass only one row of the employees array. So I'm passing this to get template function. This get template function will tell me if I have to call it to display method or call it the edit method. So if you can look at the screen below, I have two scripts written. Edit id is because this get template method will tell me I have to display or I have to edit. And this in the next line, if you can see line number 51, I am using ng template. Templating, if you have already heard, right, we can create templates in the Angular applications, and these templates can be used in small chunks in your app modules so that we can change the template of the applications easily. So in this I am using ng template for display and edit. So my get template function will tell me if I have to edit the value or if I have to display the value. So once we have analyzed what is the value, accordingly we will display the script. So if it returns display, I'll return the value display. If it returns edit, I'll display the script edit. So this is how it will be. So if you check in the starting it will be display mode only. Upon clicking on edit, it will convert to an editable text. If I want to cancel it, I will cancel it. So how this converts to an editable text now? What is the code behind it? I'll tell you. So once we pass this like edit employee, upon clicking on editing, it converts to editable text, right? So we want to know what happens to this edit employee function. Edit employee function. This edit employee function will do nothing. We'll create a temporary array, or you can say a temporary object, which will hold the index of the employees array. So which will tell you whether you have to display it or not. So I will check the local temporary object every time. If the index exists in the local array object, I will edit it, else I will display it. So let's see this code for the edit employee method. This is my edit employee method. So every time I'm passing a value employee at index of an array. So this will, what I will do in this, I'll copy the employee method, the method employee object into the selected object. Selected is nothing but an object. This is a sample blank object I have created in the starting. And what will I do? Upon clicking on the edit, I'll assign the value of the employee object to the selected object. So it's in single line code. I'll copy the objects of the employee to the selected object. That's it. That's all we are doing in the edit employee method. And what we are doing in get template method is, we will check that employee id exists or is equals to the selected employee id. Employee id has to be a key here, because if you don't have a key, you might get the multiple objects here. Maybe let's say if two employees have the same employee ID, then what will happen is in the list you will have multiple employees which are in the editable phase. So employee ID is the key value here. So what I'm searching is, every time it comes to this employee get template method function, I'll check that my key value employee ID is it existing in the selected object or not. If it's existing in the selected object, I'll return edit. Else I will return display. So if my object exists in the selected object, I will edit it, else I will display it. So on editing method, I'll do is I'll copy the object from employee to selected. So if you see the web now, this edit method will call a function which will copy this index to the selected object, and again the template function will be called, and that template function will decide that now the index exists in the selected object and this has to be in the editable phase. Now the edit script has to be called now. So if I click on edit now, the edit script has been called now. Now what the question is, how, see if it, okay, let's see the code here. In the edit script I have given the name ng model. So this helps me pre-populating the input text box. Like if the name is Shubham, so it's being pre-populated here. So I don't have to on clicking it doesn't gives me a blank index. So it populates the value which are we editing it. So it has to be a simple thing, but just we need to add it. If you give us different name here, it won't be copying the values which we have selected. So you have to use the same index, same ng model name which we are getting in the employee method. So since we have this, we're using the same name so that we get the values pre-populated here. Now this is the simple inlining. If you have, now you have two buttons, cancel or save. So if you look at the scenario, what we are doing is we are copying the index of the employees array to the selected object. Now only one line is editable here, right? So what is being done in the background is the selected object will be containing the value of this line, this index of the array. So now if you want to cancel it, if you don't want to edit it, what you can do is simply remove this index from the selected object, which means just clear the selected object. So if you see my cancel code, it will do nothing, it will cancel it. So what we are doing in the cancel code is just nothing, we are just resetting the selected object, we are making it blank again. So since it's blank again, none of the indexes has to be edited, so everything comes in the list mode again. So editing function you got, cancel function you got. Let's check for delete function. Okay, we'll see edit first. So on editing, we get these values, what these values are. So if you want to edit this value, suppose you want to modify this name from Shubham to Shubham Saxena. On clicking on save, it will be a simple HTTP request which will pass two parameters, again action and my data, and this will be a simple SQL query in the PHP side. So if you see this save button, what we are doing is we are passing the employee data, action at update employee. So update employee is the action and data we are passing the employee. So this will update the employee and then again reset the scope. That is, we are just calling the reset method which will reset the selected object. So once the index is updated, edited, we will display again everything. We will not be having the edit mode now. Again, everything will be in the display mode now. So we are calling this function to just deselect or mean just nullify the selected object here. And then we are calling the function get employee, so it will refresh the table. So if I click on this save now, in backend it has modified my name to Shubham Saxena and refreshed this list also. So this is how it works. Edit, you got it. Cancel, you got it. Save, you got it. And the only button left now is delete. So delete is nothing but a simple PHP and SQL query. We are passing a HTTP request with the action called okay, just a second, with an action called delete, and this will delete the entry from the database. So it's the delete button is the simplest part apart from the cancel part. So we will just do pass method action saying that delete employee. Delete employee will pass the object and we'll say that delete this employee where the employee is like this. So if you want to delete this employee, simply press delete and it will be deleting. So this is how the inline editing works with the AngularJS and PHP. So if you are saying that we are refreshing that screen every time, this is because we are playing with the database. So if you don't want to call this list employee function, what we can do better is we have to store all the objects in the Angular arrays. But what will this do is after doing all these changes, user might have to press a other button to save all this to a database. What I'm doing is I'm doing a HTTP request every time so that we have the updated data every time, and we need not to press an extra button after completion of all the editing to save these tasks to the database. So this is how my inline editing works. So if you want to modify anything, just you can do it. I can increase my salary here, not in my actual life, but at least here. So this is how we can edit these values. So this is a table edition, and we can do it anywhere we like. Like we have to employ or edit the user details or anything like that. So this is how this things works. That include works. Your ng include will get the value which script has to be calculated, either display or edit, and accordingly the content of the script will be called. If it's display, then the script this content will be called, and if this edit, this content will be called. So this was all for my session. Let's see if we have any slide left. Oh no.
Yeah, we can have the question and answer session right now. If someone wants to ask anything, they can.
Or any questions we have? I guess this is what the basic idea we had for the AngularJS and the inline editing.
So, actually, what I think you think share the code which you have, the application which you have developed, the c-sharpcorner.
If you can see the screen, that is the source. What?
Questions.
Okay. Manoj, you want to know about some security. So as of now, the app which we have built is not any way secure. The security comes part where we'll have to implement this routings and all. I told you about routing. So every time a route is called, like suppose a view customer or view employee is called, so that will be first calculating the session or maybe cookies where I'm managing the security part. So I'll show you a simple example. Let's show you my live project, which is a live. So here we have this is a okay. This is a sample project we have. So this includes the security part, which you are talking about, the security. Like on post and add, we have a security that only the registered members can post and add. So what we are doing here, let me open it in Internet Explorer. We have some design issues, some live project. I'll let you know later. So security part comes basically on handling it. So the application which we have developed currently is not secure, but anyways you can secure it anyways you want it. So we have to implement the session part here. We will use those sessions, and on routing every page we will call and check the value of the session, and accordingly we will check they have to display it or not. Like if you see to post an ad, if I click on it, it will ask me for the authentication for logging in, like it's Facebook here. So it's not allowed. So we are checking the value of the route and everything here. So on every route we will check the security basis, means what is the query or not, means what is the session is set or not, like that. So the app which I have showed here is just the functionality, means how we can do it, how we can edit the values. Security part can take on later sessions. So security is, I have not told you about security. It doesn't mean that we cannot do security. I hope that is answered.
We have many more questions.
I'll take up Yogesh's questions. So why hasn't it been shown? What does that mean? I'm not sure about the Yogesh question.
Yogesh is asking about .NET and that will it work in .NET or not?
Okay, I'm asking this size question. .NET app. I'm not into PHP. So size, this is for you. I told you that we are doing an HTTP request. If you see my code here, I'm doing an HTTP request. So the first parameter is the URL. So it can be your ASPX URL also. I was familiar with PHP much, so I written my API in the PHP. It can be anything. It can be a JSP also. It's nothing but a URL to your API, which will return you some data or some values you want. Like I have a function called list employees, get employees. So what I'm doing is I have my personal API which is written in PHP. If you're familiar with ASP, you can write your API in PHP, or you can use your API which is in ASP and pass that URL here. And the second part is data, this one. So whatever data you want to pass to your API, you can pass it here. If you don't want to pass anything, don't pass anything. The only required field here is the URL from which you are doing the HTTP request. That action corresponds to. Okay, so in this API, okay, if you look at the line number 57 to 59, what I'm doing is, okay, let's take a different example here. Check line number 41 to 43. I'm passing two values, action and data. It's actually a JSON object. So the HTTP post request takes the second parameter is the data parameter. So I'm passing the JSON object. So this action and data are my personally defined objects which are compatible to my web API. So if you look at my ngprocess.php page, what I am doing is I'm getting the action value here and the data value here. So my JSON object contains two values, action and data. And upon this calculation of action, I'm calling this PHP function. If action is equal to get employees, call this function. If action is equal to add employee, call this function. So action is nothing but a way of implementing my API. It can be a simple data also. I'm passing a JSON object which contains two parameters, action and data. Simply a way of accessing your API, nothing else. We develop single page mobile app. How do I call native code in AngularJS? So I'm not very much sure about the mobile applications, but what I suggest is the native code in AngularJS. As I said, this simply as you're referencing a web API or maybe anything like that. So we are doing HTTP request. How do we access the native code of the mobile app? I'm not sure how it is available to us. If it's available to us by an web API, we can surely do a HTTP request to it. If are some native functions, probably we can use Coda or something like PhoneGap, something for functions. So they have some pre-built functions. From those functions, we can directly access those native codes for this. So it actually depends on how the code is available to us. Is it via web API or something else? So it's nothing to do how we can access them. It's on how it's available to us. That's it. Any more questions? Please show how
I'm saying about the sharing of the issue
okay, Anurag, you have to say something?
Yeah, I was saying about sharing the application of the code.
Okay, so Yogesh wants to see the code to how to get the data. So Yogesh, if you see the get employee function, I'm simply doing a query for selecting all the employees. Then I'm executing this query. Whatever I'm getting from it, see, these are all PHP functions. If you want, I can explain this PHP function in a later session. But this is what is a PHP function. I'm using PDO technique to fetch all the values from the database, whatever the query has received. I'm converting it to a JSON object, JSON input. See, I already told you that passing the values between an AngularJS application, we use JSON only. So every time I send a value from PHP to a JSON application, PHP to Angular application, I convert into a JSON object using a function JSON encode. And whenever I receive the value from AngularJS application, I use the function JSON decode, because PHP is most familiar using the simple objects rather than JSON objects. So I'm using decode whenever I'm receiving from Angular. I'm using decode encode from when I'm sending from PHP to Angular. So this is how I'm sending these values. These values when are sent from here are received in the data parameter in this success function. So if you look at the get employees method, line number 60, this data I'm assigning it to the scope.employees array. So I'm returning all the employees, and these employees I'm assigning it to an array which is defined in an AngularJS, and then I'm iterating those employee array to display all the data. Is answered. Next, you have written most of the database calling or API at JS file. How can we secure JS is a lay-minded doubt from my. Okay, you have a security point of view that I'm writing everything on the JS side and JS is visible to the user. So my thing is to it, see, it's not displaying the code, it's just displaying the link you are accessing to. So I'm accessing this link, right? So if you want to go to this, let's say, you want to go to this URL. This URL will get you nothing. And since it's a PHP code, you won't see anything. So giving a URL is not a big deal. Hello? Anyone has to say something? Okay, so this URL fetches you nothing. So displaying a URL in a JS file is not a big deal since we are not displaying the code, actual code here. So it's simply the page URL. So like if you send that something dot slash process.php, so that's also a URL. So it's not about security here because we are not displaying any actual code written in there. So we are not showing the database table names or anything. It's just a URL. That's it. The main part is being done, the PHP part, which is not being displayed. Could you please share this demo project on mail ID? Shutosh, I have given you a link in my last slide. That is a link to my blog actually. So probably after this session, what I'll do is I will combine all those files. I'll just combine this PPT and will share it on my blog. Probably we will write a recap of this on the c-sharpcorner. So you might get all the links and all the files there. So it would be easily accessible for you, no problem. That's it, I guess. Anurag, any more queries? Or we should be winding up now?
I think we should find anyone doesn't have questions, we can add.
Okay, so if you have any more queries to me, so this is my email ID. You can reach me out anytime. So we'll have a more discussion if you want, and you can suggest us some more topics if you want. We can have a discussion later. So any suggestions are welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Shubham.
Thank you.